Hey guys, tonight we slip into the candlelit corridors of ancient villas, where the scent of myrrh clings to the air and the marble floors echo with the soft shuffle of sandals. You're not just attending a party, you're entering a performance, a ritual, a social battlefield disguised as leisure. You've received an invitation, which already means you're someone, or at least someone useful. But don't get too comfortable. You probably won't survive this if you don't know your place. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive at the villa just after dusk. The sky is bruised purple, and the torches lining the entrance flicker like nervous sentries. The doorman doesn't ask your name. He already knows it. You're ushered in with a nod, past columns carved with mythic beasts, and into an atrium where the ceiling opens to the stars. The air smells of wine, roasted meats, and something floral you can't quite place. Maybe jasmine, maybe ambition. The guest list is curated like a mosaic, each piece placed with intention. You're seated not by whim, but by rank. Proximity to the host signals your political weight. Farther out, you're either ornamental or expendable. Historians still argue whether these seating arrangements were purely symbolic or if they actively influenced alliances. Either way, you're being watched. You glance around. Senators, poets, generals. Their robes are spotless, their sandals polished. But it's the eyes that matter, darting, calculating, rehearsing lines for tonight's performance. You're not here to relax. You're here to be seen, to maneuver, to survive. The villa itself is a character in this drama. Walls painted with scenes of Bacchus and Venus, ceilings gilded with stars. Every detail whispers excess. But don't mistake it for indulgence. It's strategy. The host wants you impressed, maybe intimidated. You're meant to feel lucky just to be here. And then there's the music. Soft lyres, flutes, a singer whose voice drips like honey. It's background noise, yes, but also a cue. When the tempo shifts, so does the mood. A faster rhythm? Time for toasts and declarations. A slower one? Perhaps someone's about to be humiliated. Subtly, of course. You're handed a cup of wine. Not just any wine. This one's been aged in amphoras sealed with resin and honey. It's strong. Too strong, maybe. But that's the point. The wine loosens tongues, blur boundaries. It's the lubricant of Roman diplomacy. You sip, and the warmth spreads. You're ready to play your part.
But don't forget the rules. You don't speak out of turn. You don't interrupt a senator mid-anecdote, even if it's about his pet peacock. You laugh when expected, nod when required, and never, ever mention politics unless invited, and even then, tread lightly. One wrong word and you'll find yourself uninvited next time. Or worse, remembered. There's a woman across the room, draped in silk the color of blood oranges. She's not just beautiful, she's dangerous. Her husband is a magistrate, her lover a general. She smiles at you, And it's not flirtation, it's a test. You smile back, cautiously. She turns away. You passed. For now. The party is just beginning, but already the stakes are high. You're part of a living tableau, a scene painted in ambition and veiled threats. And as the night deepens, so does the intrigue. Behind every toast is a transaction. Behind every compliment, a calculation. Mainstream historians agree that Roman villa parties were more than entertainment. They were instruments of power. But fringe scholars suggest they were also psychological warfare, designed to test loyalty and manipulate perception. Were you invited because you're trusted? Or because they want to see how you behave under pressure? You won't know until later, maybe never. But for now, you sip your wine, adjust your toga, and prepare to navigate the night.
You swirl the wine in your goblet, watching the deep red cling to the sides like secrets refusing to let go. It's not just a drink, it's a tool, a weapon even. You're in a room where every sip is a signal, every refill a negotiation. The wine flows freely, but nothing about this is casual. You're in the heart of Roman social engineering, and the vintage in your hand is older than some of the guests. The host raises his cup, and the room quiets. A toast, of course, but not to friendship or health. Those are just the words. The real message is buried in tone, in eye contact, in who he looks at when he says loyalty. You're not sure if he means you. You hope he doesn't. As the night unfolds, the wine does its work. Tongues loosen, laughter grows louder, stories get riskier. You hear a senator joke about a failed military campaign, his own. That's bold or foolish. Historians still argue whether such self-deprecation was a sign of confidence or a trap laid for rivals to pounce. You're careful with your own words. You compliment the host's mosaic floor, which depicts Neptune taming sea monsters. He nods, pleased. You don't mention that Neptune was also the god of earthquakes. Too layered, too risky. Behind the velvet curtains lining the far wall, shadows move. That's where the real business happens. You've heard rumors, land deals, marriage negotiations, even bribes disguised as gifts. You're not invited behind the curtain tonight. That's either good or very bad. A servant offers you more wine. You accept because refusing would be rude. But you pace yourself. You've seen what happens to those who don't. One merchant, last month, got too drunk and confessed to tax fraud. He hasn't been seen since. The wine is sweet, but the consequences are bitter.
You overhear a conversation about grain shipments from Egypt. It sounds innocent, but you know better. Grain means power. Control the food, control the people. The man speaking is a minor official, but tonight he's being courted like royalty. His goblet never empties. There's a woman near the fountain, laughing too loudly. Her husband is a senator, but she's flirting with a poet. You wonder if it's real or staged. In Rome, even desire can be political. Some scholars believe these parties were rehearsed, guests coached beforehand on what to say, who to flatter, who to ignore. Others argue the chaos was the point, a test of adaptability. You feel eyes on you. A general, perhaps, his expression unreadable. You nod, subtly. He doesn't nod back. Noted. The wine keeps flowing. Amphorae are brought in, sealed with wax and stamped with the host's insignia. It's a flex. You're drinking his wealth, his legacy. You're reminded that in Rome, generosity is never free. It's a debt, a future favor, a string tied around your wrist. You excuse yourself to the garden, where the air is cooler and the scent of citrus trees cuts through the haze. You're not alone. A young man stands by the statue of Venus, reciting poetry to no one in particular. You recognize the verses. They're about betrayal. You wonder who he's quoting and why. Back inside, the mood shifts, the music slows, the curtains ripple. Someone important is arriving late. That's allowed if you're powerful enough. The host greets him with exaggerated warmth. You watch closely. This is the moment deals are sealed, alliances confirmed. You're not part of it, but you're close enough to observe. You return to your seat, your goblet refilled again. You're tipsy now, but alert. The wine has done its job. You're relaxed, but not reckless. You've survived the first half of the evening. Historians agree that Roman parties were arenas of influence, but some fringe theories suggest they were also psychological experiments, testing loyalty, ambition, and discretion. You're starting to believe it. You lean back, the marble cool against your spine, and let the wine settle. You've played your part. For now.
You're watching a man juggle flaming torches while reciting lines from Virgil, and somehow it's not the strangest thing you've seen tonight. Theatrics are the lifeblood of this gathering. Not just entertainment, but coded language. Every gesture, every costume, every dramatic pause is a message. You're not just witnessing a party, you're watching a live-action chess match where the pieces wear silk and speak in riddles. The host claps, and the crowd responds, not with applause, but with murmurs of approval. You join in, because silence would be suspicious. The performer bows, but his eyes scan the room. He's looking for someone, maybe a patron, maybe a rival. Historians still argue whether these performances were spontaneous or orchestrated to flatter specific guests. You suspect the latter. A woman enters, her gown shimmering like moonlight on the Tiber. She's not just dressed to impress, she's dressed to dominate. Her neckline plunges, her jewelry clinks with every step, and her perfume arrives before she does. You catch a whiff of myrrh and rosewater. It's intoxicating. You're not sure if you're supposed to admire her or fear her. She sits beside a senator and whispers something that makes him choke on his wine. You pretend not to notice, but everyone does. That's the point. In Rome, flirtation is a weapon, and tonight it's being wielded with precision. You smile at no one in particular, hoping to appear amused but not involved. The music shifts again. Now it's a slow, haunting melody, played on a double flute. The lights dim slightly. A servant lights more oil lamps, casting flickering shadows across the frescoes. You feel the mood change. It's no longer jovial, it's theatrical.
You're in Act 2, and the tension is rising. A man stands to recite a poem about betrayal. It's beautiful, but pointed. You glance at the host, who nods slowly. Is this a warning? A confession? A performance? You're not sure, and that's the beauty of it. Roman parties thrive on ambiguity. You're meant to interpret, to guess, to react. You notice a group of younger guests mimicking the older ones, laughing at the right moments, sipping wine with practiced elegance. They're learning the script. You were one of them once. Now, you're part of the cast, maybe even a supporting role.
A servant spills wine on a senator's robe. The room freezes. The senator glares, but says nothing. The servant bows deeply, trembling. You wonder if this is part of the show. Some fringe historians believe servants were sometimes used to provoke reactions, test temperaments, or distract from more important moments. You wouldn't be surprised. You're handed a fig stuffed with honey and nuts. It's delicious, but you eat slowly. Food here isn't just sustenance, it's symbolism. Figs represent fertility, honey, prosperity. You're being fed a message, not just a snack. The woman in moonlight stands again, this time to sing. Her voice is low, sultry, and the lyrics are about forbidden love. You glance around. Some guests look uncomfortable, others enchanted. You're somewhere in between. Her performance is a statement, though you're not sure what it declares. You remember a story about a party where a man recited a poem so scandalous it caused a duel. That's not happening tonight. Yet. But the tension is palpable. You sip your wine and pretend to admire the fresco of Apollo above the doorway. He's playing a lyre, surrounded by muses. You wonder what he'd think of tonight's show. Theatrics aren't limited to performers. Even the way guests interact is staged. A senator drops a casual insult disguised as a compliment. The recipient laughs, but his eyes narrow. You note the exchange. It might matter later. Historians agree that Roman parties were stages for social performance, but some argue they were also rehearsals for public life. You're practicing diplomacy, wit, and restraint. You're learning how to survive in a world where every word is a weapon. You lean back, letting the music wash over you. The night is far from over, but you've made it through another scene. You're still in character, still in the game. You drift toward the edge of the room, where the velvet curtains hang heavy and still. They're not just decoration, they're boundaries. What happens behind them isn't for everyone. You hesitate. You've heard stories, deals struck in whispers, alliances sealed with a glance, betrayals born in candlelight. You're not sure if you're ready to know what really goes on back there. A servant parts the curtain for a senator and his entourage. You catch a glimpse, low couches, golden trays, a woman reclining with a goblet balanced on her knee. The lighting is softer, the voices quieter. It's not debauchery, not exactly. It's strategy, with cushions and wine. You're reminded that in Rome,
Intimacy is often a mask for ambition. You're invited in, not directly, but with a nod from a merchant you once helped during a grain dispute. You follow, careful not to look too eager. The curtain brushes your shoulder like a warning. Inside, the air is warmer, scented with cinnamon and sandalwood. The room is smaller, more intimate. You're closer to power now, and it smells expensive. A man gestures for you to sit. You do, adjusting your toga to avoid wrinkling. Across from you, a woman in a sheer stola is discussing land rights with a general. Her tone is playful, but her words are sharp. You sip your wine and listen. You're not here to speak, yet. Historians still argue whether these private chambers were meant for pleasure or politics. The truth is, they were both. The lines blur. A kiss can be a promise, a touch, a threat. You watch as a senator laughs too loudly at a joke about taxation. He's nervous. You file that away. A servant brings figs and dates, arranged like offerings. You take one, chewing slowly. The general leans in and asks your opinion on a new aqueduct project. You answer carefully, citing cost and public benefit. He nods, pleased. You've passed another test.
Behind you, someone begins playing a cithara. The music is slow, hypnotic. You feel yourself relax, but you stay alert. This is where reputations are made or ruined. You remember a story about a man who bragged too much in one of these rooms. He was exiled within the month. A woman touches your arm lightly. Her nails are painted with crushed beetle shells, shimmering in the lamplight. She asks if you've read the latest satire circulating the forum. You have. She smiles. You're in. The conversation shifts to marriage alliances. You listen as names are dropped, dowries discussed, bloodlines traced. It's like watching chess played with people. You wonder if your name will come up. It doesn't. You're relieved. Someone mentions the Vestal Virgins. The room quiets. Their power is respected, their purity feared. A merchant jokes about trying to bribe one. No one laughs. You sip your wine and change the subject. You notice a scroll tucked under a cushion. It's sealed with wax. You don't ask. You don't need to. It's probably a contract, or a confession, or both. You're reminded that in Rome, paper can be more dangerous than a sword. The general stands and stretches. He's done for the night. Others follow. You rise, bow slightly, and exit the chamber. The curtain closes behind you with a soft thud. You're back in the main room, but you're different now. You've seen behind the drapes. You've survived. Historians agree that these hidden rooms were crucibles of influence. Fringe scholars suggest they were also psychological sanctuaries, places where masks could slip, if only briefly. You're not sure. You just know you'll be invited again. You return to your seat, your goblet refilled. The music swells, the party continues. But you've crossed a threshold. You're no longer just a guest. You're part of the machinery.
You blink, and suddenly you're in medieval England. The torches are gone, replaced by rushlights and smoky hearths. The marble floors have turned to timber, and the silk curtains to woolen tapestries. But the theater of status, oh, it's still here, just stitched into every seam of your clothing. You're standing in a manor hall, adjusting the folds of your houppelande. It's heavy, lined with fur and dyed a deep crimson, a color reserved for nobility. You're sweating, but you dare not remove it. Fashion here isn't about comfort, it's about survival. One wrong fabric, and you're either fined or flogged. Sumptuary laws ruled this world. You can't wear ermine unless you're a duke. You can't wear purple unless you're royalty. Even the shape of your shoes is regulated. You glance down at your poulaines, those absurdly long, pointy shoes, and wonder how anyone ran in these. They didn't. That was the point. Historians agree that medieval fashion was a rigid social code, but some argue it was also a form of rebellion. Fringe scholars point to peasants who dyed their tunics illegally, or merchants who wore silk under their cloaks, defying the hierarchy in secret. You wonder if your undergarments are technically treasonous. You walk past a servant wearing a plain woolen kirtle. She bows, eyes down. Her clothing marks her as lower class, but it's also practical. She can move, bend, work. You envy her freedom, just a little, but you wouldn't trade places. Not tonight. A noblewoman enters, her gown trailing behind her like a comet. It's layered, embroidered, and stiff with starch. She moves like a ship in full sail. Her headdress towers above her, a hennin that could double as a siege weapon. You nod respectfully. She doesn't nod back. That's expected.
You overhear a conversation about a new law banning gold thread for anyone below the rank of baron. Someone jokes about stitching silver instead. You laugh politely, but you know it's not funny. A tailor was jailed last month for using forbidden velvet. The law is no joke. You're invited to a feast. You accept, adjusting your belt to show off the tiny dagger tucked into it. It's decorative, of course, but also symbolic. You're allowed to carry it because of your status. A peasant with the same blade would be arrested. At the feast, you're seated according to rank, again. You're starting to miss the Roman parties. At least the wine was better. Here, you're served trenchers of meat and thick ale. The food is hearty, the conversation less so. You nod through a story about a knight's new armor, which apparently cost more than a village. You glance at the tapestries. They depict hunting scenes, battles, saints, but also fashion. One shows a noblewoman being crowned, her gown flowing like water. You realize clothing isn't just identity, it's propaganda. Historians still debate whether medieval fashion was more about control or aspiration. You suspect it was both. You're wearing your ambition, stitched in thread and trimmed in fur. You excuse yourself and step outside. The air is cold, the stars sharp. You wrap your cloak tighter and feel the weight of your status. It's heavy, but necessary. You pass a child wearing a miniature version of noble garb. Even the young are dressed to signal rank. You smile, but the child doesn't smile back. He's been taught not to. You return to the hall, where the fire crackles and the fashion continues. You're part of the tapestry now, woven into a world where every stitch matters.
You're standing in front of a mirror. Well, not a mirror exactly, more like a polished piece of metal. and you're trying to decide whether the fur trim on your cloak is too ostentatious. You're not worried about taste, you're worried about legality. Welcome to the world of sumptuary laws, where fashion isn't just personal, it's political. You tug at the sleeve. It's lined with squirrel fur, which is technically allowed for your rank. But the embroidery? That might be pushing it. You remember the tailor's warning, 1 too many gold threads and you'll be fined. You laughed then. You're not laughing now. Sumptuary laws are everywhere. They dictate what you wear, how you wear it, and when. You can't wear silk unless you're a knight. You can't wear velvet unless you own land. Even colors are regulated. Blue is for merchants, green for yeomen. Purple? Don't even think about it. Historians agree these laws were designed to maintain social order, but some argue they were also a form of economic control, keeping luxury goods in the hands of the elite. Fringe scholars suggest they were psychological tools, reinforcing identity through restriction. You feel both theories tugging at your hemline. You walk through the market, watching people navigate the fashion minefield. A woman wears a linen dress dyed with onion skins, cheap but clever. A man sports a cloak with hidden silk lining. He's gambling. If caught, he'll pay. But for now, he walks taller. You pass a tailor's stall. He's selling legal garments. Plain, dull, safe. You nod politely, but you don't stop. You're looking for something with flair, something that says, I know the rules and how to bend them. You find a pair of shoes with brass buckles. Technically allowed, barely. You buy them, feeling rebellious. You'll wear them to the next feast and see who notices. At the feast, you scan the room. Nobles flaunt their wealth, fur-lined sleeves, jeweled belts, towering headdresses. But even they tread carefully. One wrong accessory, and the king's steward might take note. You sip your ale and adjust your cloak, making sure the embroidery stays hidden. A bard sings a song about a merchant who wore ermine and was flogged in the square. Everyone laughs. You don't. You know it's based on a true story. You overhear a conversation about a new law banning feathers for anyone below the rank of earl. Someone jokes about using a straw instead. You smile, but you know the enforcement is real. Last week, a milliner was fined for selling aspirational hats. Historians still debate whether these laws were effective. Some say they reinforced class divisions. Others argue they sparked creativity. People found ways to express themselves within the rules. You think both are true. You've seen peasants wear patched garments with pride, and nobles hide forbidden silk under layers of wool. You step outside, the night air crisp. You pass a group of children playing. One wears a tunic too fine for his station. You wonder if his parents are ambitious or reckless. You return to your manor, where your wardrobe is both armor and liability. You sort through your garments, separating the legal from the questionable. You keep the squirrel fur. You hide the gold thread. You lie down, the weight of your cloak still on your shoulders. You dream of a world where fashion is freedom. But for now, it's law.
You're walking through a great hall, and the sound of metal echoes with every step. It's not the clatter of weapons, it's fashion. You're wearing armor, but not for battle. Tonight, it's for display.
Welcome to the medieval paradox, where steel is style and protection is prestige. Your breastplate gleams under torchlight, polished to a mirror finish. It's etched with vines and lions, symbols of your house, yes, but also of your wealth. You're not expecting a fight, you're expecting admiration. Maybe envy, maybe both. Historians agree that armor in the late Middle Ages was as much about status as survival. Knights wore suits that cost more than a peasant's lifetime earnings. But fringe scholars argue that some armor was deliberately impractical, designed to impress, not protect. You believe it. Your gauntlets are so ornate you can barely hold a spoon. You pass a squire struggling with his master's greaves. They're gilded, of course, and covered in tiny fleur-de-lis. You offer a nod. He nods back, grateful. You remember your own days as a squire, polishing chainmail until your fingers bled. Now, others polish yours. At the feast, you're seated beside a baron whose helmet is shaped like a dragon's head. It's ridiculous, it's magnificent. You compliment it. He grunts approval. You're in. The conversation turns to tournaments, not war, games, jousting, melee, pageantry. You listen as a knight brags about his latest victory, his lance tipped with silver. You wonder how much of it was staged. Historians still argue whether tournaments were genuine contests or choreographed spectacles. You suspect a bit of both. You're served roasted boar and spiced wine. You eat slowly, mindful of your armor's constraints. A servant offers to loosen your cuirass. You decline. You're uncomfortable, but regal. That's the point. Across the hall, a lady wears a gown embroidered with chainmail patterns. She's not a warrior, but she's signaling something. Strength, perhaps, or alliance. You nod. She nods back. Message received. You excuse yourself and walk the perimeter of the hall. Your armor clinks with every step. People notice. That's the goal. You're not just dressed, you're declaring. You pass a tapestry depicting a knight slaying a serpent. His armor is impossibly ornate. You wonder if it's based on a real person. Probably not. But the myth matters more than the man. Outside, the moonlight hits your pauldrons just right. You catch your reflection in a basin and admire the silhouette. You look powerful. You feel powerful. You're reminded that in this world, appearance is half the battle. You return to the hall, where the music swells and the wine flows. You're part of the spectacle now, a walking symbol of status and style. Historians agree that medieval armor was a blend of function and fashion, but some fringe theories suggest it was also psychological, intended to intimidate, to elevate, to isolate. You feel all three. You sit, your armor creaking, and raise your goblet. You've survived another night in steel and silk.
You're standing in front of a polished obsidian slab, your reflection flickering in the candlelight. You dip your fingers into a small alabaster jar filled with thick black coal, and with practiced ease you trace it along your eyelids. It's not just for beauty, it's protection. Against the sun, against evil,
against mediocrity. Welcome to ancient Egypt, where cosmetics are sacred and grooming is theology. The coal stings slightly, but you don't flinch. It's made from galena, a lead-based mineral. Historians agree it helped reduce glare and prevent eye infections. But fringe scholars suggest it also served as a spiritual shield, warding off the evil eye. You feel safer already. You reach for a pot of red ochre, dabbing it onto your cheeks and lips. The color is bold, vibrant, divine. It's the shade of life, of blood, of power. You're not just painting your face, you're aligning yourself with Hathor, goddess of love and joy. You smile. She'd approve. The room smells of frankincense and lotus. You've already bathed in scented oils, shaved your body smooth, and rubbed your skin with unguents made from honey and animal fat. You're glowing. Literally, your skin catches the light like polished gold. You're ready. Historians agree that beauty rituals in Egypt were deeply tied to religion and status. But some fringe theories suggest they were also political, used to signal allegiance, seduction, and superiority. You glance at your neighbor whose eyeliner is smudged. Amateur. You adjust your wig, made from human hair and palm fibers. It's heavy, but regal. Your real hair is shaved beneath it. Cleanliness is divine. You remember the story of a priest who was expelled for having dandruff. You checked twice this morning. You're invited to a gathering at a noble's home. You arrive, fragrant and flawless. The host greets you with a nod, clearly impressed. You're seated near the center, close to the musicians and the wine. You've earned it. The conversation turns to perfumes. Someone boasts of owning a vial of myrrh from Punt. You nod politely, but you know yours is better. Blended with cinnamon and blue lotus, aged in clay. You dab a little behind your ears just in case. A servant offers you a wax cone to place atop your wig. You accept. It melts slowly, releasing scent and status. You're reminded that in Egypt, even your aroma is a declaration. You glance at the wall paintings, figures with perfect skin, symmetrical faces, elaborate jewelry. You know they're idealized, but you strive to match them anyway. Beauty here isn't vanity, it's virtue. Historians still debate whether these rituals were accessible to all classes. Some say even laborers used coal and oils. Others argue that true beauty was reserved for the elite. You suspect the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Everyone participated, but not equally. You excuse yourself to the garden, where papyrus rustles in the breeze. You reapply your eyeliner, just a touch. You're not vain, you're vigilant. You return to the gathering, where the music swells and the wine flows. You're part of the divine tapestry now, a living embodiment of grace and intention. You lie down later, your skin still fragrant, your wig carefully stored. You've honored the gods. You've honored yourself.
You're sitting cross-legged on a woven mat, and a servant is gently placing a wax cone atop your wig. It's warm, fragrant, and slowly melting, releasing a scent that's equal parts floral and mysterious. You're not just perfuming yourself, you're participating in a ritual older than most pyramids. Welcome to the world of ancient Egyptian beauty, where crocodile dung might be your next skincare ingredient. Yes, you heard that right, crocodile dung. Mixed with honey and natron, it's said to soften skin and ward off infections. Historians agree that Egyptians were pioneers in cosmetic chemistry, blending natural ingredients with spiritual intention. But fringe scholars argue that some recipes were more symbolic than effective, like the dung creams, which may have been more about ritual purification than dermatology. You're not sure, but your skin does feel oddly smooth. You reach for a jar of perfumed oil, lotus and cinnamon, aged in alabaster. You rub it into your arms, your neck, your feet. The scent is intoxicating. You're aligning yourself with divine forces, signaling purity, status, and readiness. You're not just fragrant, you're fortified. You glance at your wig, styled with braids and adorned with beads. It's made from human hair, collected and woven by skilled artisans. Your real hair is shaved beneath it, of course. Cleanliness is sacred. You remember the temple priest who was dismissed for having lice. You checked twice this morning. A friend joins you, her skin glowing with a sheen of almond oil. She's wearing a linen dress bleached with sunlight and river water. You compliment her eyeliner, thick, symmetrical, dramatic. She smiles, revealing teeth cleaned with powdered pumice. You're both radiant. You're both ready. You're invited to a banquet at a noble's estate. You arrive shimmering and scented. The host greets you with a nod, clearly impressed. You're seated near the musicians, close to the wine. You've earned it. The conversation turns to beauty rituals. Someone boasts of using crushed carob pods for exfoliation. Another mentions a face mask made from sour milk and clay. You nod politely, but you know your regimen is superior. You've mastered the balance of science and spirituality. You're served figs, dates, and honey cakes. You eat slowly, mindful of your appearance. Even chewing is a performance. You sip wine from a faience cup, careful not to smudge your lip pigment. You're flawless. You're focused. Historians still debate whether these rituals were universal. Some say even laborers used coal and oils. Others argue that true beauty was reserved for the elite. You suspect the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Everyone participated, but not equally. You excuse yourself to the garden, where papyrus rustles in the breeze. You reapply your eyeliner, just a touch. You're not vain, you're vigilant. You return to the gathering, where the music swells and the wine flows. You're part of the divine tapestry now, a living embodiment of grace and intention. Later, you lie down on a reed mat, your skin still fragrant, your wig carefully stored. You've honored the gods, you've honored yourself. And yes, you'll probably try the crocodile cream again. Just maybe not tomorrow.
You're standing in front of a low table covered in alabaster jars, bronze tweezers, and bundles of reeds. It's your grooming hour, and the stakes are high. In ancient Egypt, beauty isn't just about looking good, it's about aligning with cosmic order. You dip your fingers into a jar of scented oil and begin the ritual. Smooth, fragrant, divine. You're not just preparing your body, you're preparing your soul. Your wig sits nearby, freshly styled and powdered. It's made from human hair, woven with palm fibers, and scented with myrrh.
You shaved your head this morning again. Cleanliness is sacred. Hair is chaos. You remember the story of a priest who was expelled for letting his hair grow. Historians agree that hair removal was a spiritual act, a rejection of disorder. Fringe scholars suggest it was also a way to control lice. You suspect both are true. You reach for your eyeliner, coal mixed with galena and soot. You trace it carefully, extending the line past your temples. It's not just fashion, it's protection against glare, against evil, against mediocrity. You feel stronger already. You rub almond oil into your arms, your legs, your chest. The scent is subtle, but purposeful. You're aligning with Hathor, goddess of love and joy. You smile. She'd approve. You're invited to a temple ceremony. You arrive glowing, fragrant, and symmetrical. The priests nod. You're not just a guest, you're a participant. Your appearance signals reverence, discipline, and divine favor. Inside the temple, the air is thick with incense. You kneel before a statue of Isis, your skin gleaming in the torchlight. You offer a sprig of lotus and a prayer. You're not just beautiful, you're blessed. Later, you join a gathering by the Nile. The breeze is warm, the water shimmering. You sip wine and listen to music played on lyres and flutes. You're surrounded by others who've bathed, shaved, scented, and painted. You're part of a living mosaic. You overhear a conversation about a new face mask made from sour milk and clay. Someone swears it cured their wrinkles. Another mentions a perfume blended with blue lotus and cinnamon. You nod politely, but you know your regimen is superior. You've mastered the balance of science and spirituality. Historians still debate whether these rituals were universal. Some say even laborers used coal and oils. Others argue that true beauty was reserved for the elite. You suspect the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Everyone participated, but not equally. You excuse yourself to reapply your lip pigment, red ochre mixed with beeswax. You're not vain, you're vigilant. You return to the gathering where the music swells and the wine flows. You're part of the divine tapestry now, a living embodiment of grace and intention. Later, you lie down on a reed mat, your skin still fragrant, your wig carefully stored. You've honored the gods, you've honored yourself. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again, because in Egypt, beauty is eternal.
You're standing at the edge of a marble courtyard, staring into the flickering flame that never dies. It's the sacred fire of Vesta, goddess of the hearth, and you're one of the few allowed near it. You're a Vestal virgin now, chosen, cloaked, and bound by a vow that will last 30 years. You're not just a priestess, you're a symbol, a paradox, a living promise. Your white robes rustle as you move, the folds heavy with meaning, purity, discipline, power. You're escorted by guards, but not for protection, for surveillance. You're revered, yes, but also watched, closely,
constantly. Historians agree that Vestal virgins held immense status in Roman society. They could own property, pardon prisoners, and sit in places reserved for senators. But fringe scholars argue that their power was performative, granted only as long as they remained untouched. You feel both truths pressing against your skin. You remember the selection ceremony. You were chosen at age 6, plucked from your family, your future rewritten. The Pontifex Maximus touched your forehead and declared you sacred. You didn't understand then. You do now. You walk past the temple's inner sanctum, where the eternal flame burns. It's your duty to keep it alive. If it goes out, Rome itself is said to be in danger. You've seen the panic when it flickers. You've seen the punishment when it fails. You kneel and offer a prayer. Not just words, intentions. You're aligning yourself with divine order. You're a bridge between gods and mortals. You're also very, very alone. You're invited to a public ceremony. You arrive in full regalia, your veil draped just so. The crowd parts for you. Senators bow. Children stare. You're a celebrity, but untouchable. You smile gently, but never too wide. You're not here to charm. You're here to endure. You overhear a merchant whispering about your vow. He wonders what happens if you break it. You know the answer. Burial alive. No trial, no appeal. Just a pit, a loaf of bread, and silence. You walk past him without a glance. Historians still debate whether the punishment was ever truly carried out. Some say it was symbolic. Others point to records of executions. You don't care. You believe it. You've seen the fear in the eyes of those who serve beside you. You return to the temple, where the flame dances and the silence is sacred. You light incense and reflect. You've given up marriage, children, freedom, but you've gained influence, reverence, and a kind of immortality. You lie down in your chamber, the walls cool and quiet. You dream of fire, of veils, of marble corridors. You're not just a woman, you're a myth in motion. And tomorrow, you'll rise again, cloaked, chosen, bound.
You walk through the forum, cloaked in white, your veil fluttering like a whisper of smoke. People part as you pass, not out of fear, but reverence. You're a Vestal virgin, and your presence is both sacred and unsettling. You wield no sword, no decree, yet your influence ripples through Rome like a quiet tide. You're watched, yes, but you're also watching. Your footsteps echo against the stone, and you feel the weight of your vow with every stride. 30 years of chastity, 30 years of ritual, 30 years of being both more and less than a citizen. Historians agree that Vestals were granted extraordinary privileges, freedom from paternal control, front row seats at games, even the power to free condemned prisoners. But fringe scholars argue that these freedoms were a gilded cage, designed to mask the surveillance beneath the sanctity. You feel that tension in your bones. You arrive at the temple,
where the eternal flame flickers in its bronze basin. You kneel, adjust the logs, and whisper a prayer. You're not just tending fire, you're tending fate. If the flame dies, Rome's divine favor dies with it. No pressure. A senator arrives requesting a private audience. You grant it. He bows low, then speaks of omens, of dreams, of political unrest. He wants your blessing. You offer it, carefully, ceremonially. You're not a politician, but your approval carries weight. You're a symbol of divine order. Your nod is worth more than gold. You return to your chamber, where scrolls line the walls. You study rituals, astronomy, law. You're educated, more than most Roman women. You know the stars, the seasons, the sacred texts. You're not just a figurehead, you're a scholar. You overhear whispers from the courtyard. A young Vestal was seen speaking too long with a soldier. The older priestesses are concerned. You say nothing, but you make a note. You'll speak with her tomorrow. Gently, firmly. Historians still debate whether Vestals truly held political sway. Some say they were pawns. Others argue they were quiet power brokers, consulted in secret, revered in public. You suspect both are true. You've seen senators hesitate before speaking to you. You've seen emperors glance your way for approval. You walk the perimeter of the temple, your sandals silent on the stone. You pass statues of Vesta, of Roma, of the divine ancestors. You feel their gaze. You feel your role. You're not just preserving fire, you're preserving Rome's soul. You attend a public ritual where the crowd watches your every move. You pour libations, recite verses, light incense. You're flawless. You're focused. You're performing, but it's not an act. It's a duty. Later you sit in the garden, the olive trees swaying gently. You sip water from a clay cup and reflect. You've given up much, but you've gained something rare: quiet authority. You speak softly, and the world listens. You lie down in your chamber, the walls cool and quiet. You dream of fire, of veils, of marble corridors. You are not just a woman. You're a myth in motion. And tomorrow, you'll rise again, cloaked, chosen, bound.
You sit in the marble sanctuary, the flickering flame casting long shadows across your veil. Around you, the silence is thick, reverent, expectant. You're a Vestal virgin, and tonight, your presence is more than ceremonial. It's political. Your purity incarnate, but also a pawn in Rome's grand game of power and perception. A senator enters, his robes rustling like dry leaves. He bows, not just out of respect, but necessity. Your vow of chastity makes you untouchable, incorruptible. You're the only woman in Rome whose word can't be questioned, at least publicly. Historians agree that Vestals were revered, but fringe scholars argue that their purity was weaponized, used to legitimize political agendas. You've seen it firsthand. You remember the trial last year, a Vestal accused of breaking her vow.
No evidence, just whispers. She was buried alive. You attended the ceremony, your face expressionless. Inside, you were screaming, but silence is your armor. You walk through the temple, past statues of Vesta and Roma. You pause before one, a depiction of a Vestal holding a scroll and a torch. You wonder if she ever doubted. You wonder if you will. You're invited to a private gathering at a senator's villa. You arrive veiled, escorted, and silent. The guests hush as you enter. You're not here to speak. You're here to be seen. Your presence sanctifies the event. You're a living seal of divine approval. A young noblewoman approaches, curious. She asks about your life, your vow, your thoughts. You answer carefully. You speak of duty, of honor, of sacrifice. You don't mention loneliness. You don't mention fear. Historians still debate whether Vestals were truly free. Some say their privileges outweighed their constraints. Others argue they were prisoners of ritual. You feel both truths pressing against your skin. You return to the temple, where the flame dances and the silence is sacred. You light incense and reflect. You've given up marriage, children, freedom, but you've gained influence, reverence, and a kind of immortality. You lie down in your chamber, the walls cool and quiet. You dream of fire, of veils, of marble corridors. You're not just a woman, you're a myth in motion. And tomorrow, you'll rise again, cloaked, chosen, bound.
You trace your fingers along the edge of a tapestry, its threads worn but vibrant. It depicts a Roman banquet, a medieval coronation, and an Egyptian beauty ritual, all stitched together like a timeline of identity. You're beginning to see the pattern. Across centuries, across empires, ritual isn't just tradition, it's transformation. You're not just dressing up, you're becoming. You remember the Roman villa where seating arrangements whispered power. You remember the medieval cloak that could get you fined. You remember the Egyptian eyeliner that protected your soul. Each moment was a performance, yes, but also a declaration. You were signaling who you were, who you weren't, and who you hoped to be. Historians agree that ritual shaped identity in ancient societies, but fringe scholars argue that these rituals were also tools of resistance, ways for the marginalized to assert presence, for the powerful to reinforce control. You've seen both sides. You've worn both masks. You walk through a gallery of artifacts, bronze mirrors, jeweled belts, wax cones, ceremonial daggers. Each item tells a story. Each item was once held, worn, used. You imagine the hands that touched them, the intentions behind them, the identities they helped construct. You pause before a suit of medieval armor, etched with vines and lions. You remember the knight who wore it, not for battle, but for status. You remember the clink of metal in the banquet hall, the way it silenced the room. You smile. You understand now. You move to a display of Egyptian cosmetics,
Coal jars, pigment palettes, perfumed oils. You remember the ritual, the precision, the divine alignment. You remember the scent of lotus and the weight of your wig. You inhale deeply. The memory lingers. You glance at a Roman fresco, guests reclining, wine flowing, eyes calculating. You remember the velvet curtains, the whispered deals, the theatrical flirtation. You remember surviving the night. You nod. You earned that memory. Historians still debate whether these rituals were universal or exclusive. Some say they united societies. Others argue they divided them. You suspect both are true. Rituals create belonging, but also boundaries. You sit in a quiet corner, surrounded by echoes of the past. You reflect on the Vestal virgins, cloaked in purity and paradox. You remember the flame, the vow, the silence. You remember the power that came with restraint. You realize that across cultures, across centuries, ritual was the thread that stitched identity into being. Whether through fashion, beauty, or ceremony, people found ways to say, "This is who I am," or at least, "This is who I must be." You lie back, the tapestry above you swaying gently. You're part of the pattern now, a living thread in a fabric woven by time. And tomorrow, you'll rise again, cloaked, painted, armored, ready.
You lie beneath a canopy of stars, the night air soft against your skin, and you begin to see it all more clearly. The Roman villa, the medieval hall, the Egyptian garden, they weren't just places, they were stages. And you were always performing, always signaling, always belonging, or trying to. You remember the wine-soaked whispers behind velvet curtains, where power was traded like coin. You remember the embroidered cloak that marked your rank, the armor that clanked with every step, the eyeliner that aligned you with the divine. You remember the vow that bound you to fire and silence. Each ritual, each costume, each gesture was a declaration, "I matter. I am seen." Historians agree that spectacle and control were deeply intertwined in ancient societies, but fringe scholars suggest something more tender, that beneath the layers of law and luxury was a simple human need to be part of something, to be recognized, to be remembered. You feel that truth settle into your bones. You walk through a dreamscape of rituals. A Roman senator raises his goblet. A medieval knight adjusts his gilded helm. An Egyptian priestess smooths scented oil over her arms. A Vestal virgin lights the eternal flame. They're all performing. They're all believing. They're all yearning. You pause before a mirror, not glass, but polished bronze. Your reflection is layered. You see the kohl-lined eyes of Egypt, the fur-trimmed cloak of England, the wine-stained lips of Rome. You see the veil of the Vestal. You see yourself. You realize that ritual isn't just about control. It's about connection to gods, to society, to self. You weren't just surviving these worlds. You were shaping them, stitch by stitch, sip by sip, flame by flame. You lie down, the stars above you blinking like ancient eyes. You're part of the story now, a thread in the tapestry, a whisper in the ritual. And tomorrow you'll rise again, cloaked, painted, armored, ready.
The night deepens, and the echoes of ancient footsteps fade into the hush of your room. The marble halls, the perfumed gardens, the flickering flames, they dissolve gently, like incense smoke curling into the dark. You've walked through centuries tonight, through rituals that shaped empires and identities, through garments and gestures that whispered power and longing. Let your breath slow now. Let the weight of silk and armor slip away. You're no longer seated beside senators or cloaked in divine vows. You're here, quiet and still, wrapped in the soft fabric of sleep. The stories remain, tucked into the folds of memory, ready to return when you need them. You've seen how people across time reached for meaning, through beauty, through ceremony, through the simple act of being seen. And maybe, just maybe, you've found a little of that for yourself tonight. So, close your eyes. Let the background hum carry you. The flame still burns, the wine still flows, the stars still watch. But for now, you rest.